Welcome to Markets Radar with Jeremy Quintanilla. My name is Jeremy Quintanilla, and in Markets Radar, I talk about what's happening in markets, stocks, bonds, crypto, and everything in between, and give you my take on what it all means. I hope you're having a fantastic Saturday. I'm recording this June 13th, 2026, so some of this news may have changed by the time you hear it. I am getting this out a little later than I usually do on Saturdays, mainly because I have started doing archery and had my first lesson this morning with a bunch of children. It was an adults and children's basic class, which was mainly just me and like 40 children. Actually, it was like 16 or 17 children, but we had a good time. And I had a great time learning how to use the recurve bow. And I'm going to be going into the adult class here soon, next Saturday, and then going to do some private training. Reason why is because my partner, Maria, she also does archery. She's really good at archery. She's even actually hit an arrow into the bullseye, the middle of it, and then also split that arrow, kind of like you see in Robin Hood, which I think is kind of cool and also super attractive. But thought it would be something cool that we could do together because I've always wanted to learn archery. In fact, in ancient cultures, you kind of had to learn archery. It was one of the main arts. I think in Indian culture and Buddhist, there's a lot of Buddhist texts that reference the art of archery, and mainly a Hindu text, though, I believe. And it's something that I've always wanted to do. So I spent the morning doing that and then got home, had to move a piano. I don't know I'm telling you all this, but that's what happened. And now we're here and we're finally getting into some of this crazy news. And I'd like to start it off with this. The US government issued an unprecedented directive ordering Anthropic to suspend access to its Fable 5 and Mythos 5 models for any foreign national citing national security concerns. This was to ensure compliance with this sweeping mandate. Anthropic shut down access to these systems for all customers globally. And I thought something was afoot. I was really excited about Fable 5 coming out because I've mainly moved over to using Claude and Anthropic, and using Opus is the latest one, I believe. And so being able to use Fable, I was really excited about it. And I was going to use it today to make some images and get some data points out there to the public. And when I saw that it was blocked, I was like, oh, something must have happened, because I was pretty sure that it went live yesterday. And I saw it yesterday and thought that I could use it. But again, Anthropic shut down access to those systems for all customers. The ban was triggered by the discovery of a jailbreak vulnerability that allowed users to bypass the safety guardrails of the Fable 5 model. Amazon researchers were the ones who uncovered these vulnerabilities, and tech leaders, including Amazon CEO Andy Jassy, escalated these security risks to senior US officials. The restriction sent shockwaves through the tech sector today, threatening to set a new precedent for all major AI developers like OpenAI, Google, and Meta. Anthropic publicly pushed back, stating that recalling a commercial model over a narrow jailbreak could essentially halt all new model deployments for all frontier model providers. And that's where I want to start. Is I believe that the role of government, whether you don't believe in the taxation of individuals, I believe that we can all come to, for the most part, unless you're a really far right individual, that it would be a libertarian that thinks that we could do something different, or privatize police, which is something that would be ridiculous in my opinion. I think that we believe that the government should be responsible for maintaining the safety of all of its citizens. And so when we're thinking about artificial intelligence, I am actually a component, or I actually agree that we should be moving forward with some kind of area within the United States government that looks at these models and gives the okay for them to be released based off of the safety. Now, do I think that that might push maybe China to move faster than us in some regards? Possibly. But I would prefer that we keep the United States and the United States citizens safer than allowing a commercial company to put any type of artificial intelligence out there and ignore the guardrails, like in this case, even though those guardrails might not have been a part of what was commercially being deployed. This regulatory roadblock collides head on with the race for AI profitability. So both Anthropic and OpenAI are eyeing initial public offerings as soon as this year. The government's willingness to shut down a flagship commercial product introduces massive uncertainty for investors backing these frontier models. Depending on what happens in Washington, the mandate highlights significant AI policy confusion as the end-of-day directive contradicts a recent executive order by President Donald Trump. That's because he's an asshat that suggested that the administration would not enforce mandatory model reviews or licensing regimes. So again, they went out there and said they weren't going to enforce models or licensing regimes, and that is actually what they did with this new mandate. It escalates a long-standing friction, which happened earlier this year, where Anthropic clashed with the Pentagon over military use of its technology, resulting in the company being labeled a U.S. supply chain risk, which traditionally doesn't happen with U.S. companies. According to David Sachs, the Trump's AI czar, the administration is bewildered that Anthropic hasn't fixed the safety issues, which I agree with that. I agree with David Sachs in this regard. Why hasn't Anthropic fixed these safety issues if they were going to release this commercially? The government's goal for Anthropic is to remediate the jailbreak so the export controls can be lifted and Fable 5 can return to general release, which I would like for that to happen because I was excited about it. And so, again, the reason why this probably happened, in my personal opinion, is that this sweeping government mandate restricting access to Anthropic's models has sparked significant constitutional and commercial concerns. In my opinion, which I'm going to touch here in a moment on, is the fact that this is retaliation from Donald Trump on Anthropic, which is one of the most dictator-y, dickish moves that one could do, and why Donald Trump should not be our president and is essentially just a dictator and a dick. While both the Biden and Trump administrations have previously limited foreign access to physical technologies like semiconductors, placing unprecedented restrictions directly on the AI software itself has raised a lot of constitutional questions. And essentially everything that Donald Trump raises constitutional questions because he has no respect for the fucking Constitution. Anthropic strongly opposes the government's justification for the shutdown, stating that a narrow potential jailbreak should not be grounds for recalling a commercial model that has already been deployed to hundreds of millions of users. Now, I agree with David Sachs that they should have addressed the security concerns, but again, I also, if to Anthropic's knowledge and understanding, maybe this is a new concern or a new thing that happened and they are fixing it and they need to fix it. In my opinion, this is just my opinion, they did this, or Trump did this, as retaliation. The company warned that applying the strict standard, this is Anthropic, across the tech industry would essentially halt all new model deployments for all frontier model providers. This government intervention, again, threatens OpenAI, Google, and Meta, but again, we should have a board that reviews these, at least to some degree, so that we have an understanding of what type of technology is going out into the space so that we can make sure that we're protecting our citizens. And it also allows us to understand the technology that the US is continuing to make so that the government can put things into place to make sure that maybe we could move even faster than China. China has come together as a government and a group of people to move artificial intelligence forward. We cannot just let a bunch of, because the difference is that the government is tightly micromanaging the stuff in China that's happening. They're a part of it. The companies that are, whether or not you think that it's full dictatorship and they're not really private companies, that part's irrelevant. The fact is that the Chinese government and the Chinese people and the Chinese companies that are making AI are all on the same trajectory and understanding of what is specifically happening. And our government needs to do that by micromanaging and being a part of the creation and the development of these specific models. These restrictions arrive at a critical time for the AI industry, colliding with developers' efforts to prove profitability to investors, which I don't think that they have personally. This uncertainty poses a direct commercial threat as both Anthropic and OpenAI, again, are seeking their IPOs this year. In regards to that specific piece of it, they can go fuck themselves if they do not have the things in place to keep the American people safe from artificial intelligence as it continues to grow. I know people are going to push back and they're going to be, well, it doesn't actually have the ability to do these things. It doesn't have the, or like nefarious things. It doesn't have the ability to do it yet. In these instances, we're the creation of a species, right? We're the creation of some type of being. Like, you could think of us even like, let's say aliens were doing the same thing and they ended up creating humans. What if we're a more advanced version of artificial intelligence created by aliens? And they're like, well, shit, we fucked this up. Just go throw them on another planet. They can figure it out themselves from there rather than just destroying us. Now, I know that it's a little far-fetched, but my point is that AI, we will continue to do what we need to do with AI. It'll continue to evolve, and there is a possibility that it could be used for really bad stuff. And I think that the government should have control over it to some degree, or at least a review process. Now, again, this recent shutdown, it's not the first time that the Trump administration penalized Anthropic after a disagreement. Earlier this year, Anthropic actively clashed with the Pentagon over allowing its technology to be used for military and surveillance purposes. Following that blow up, the administration retaliated by designating the company a U.S. supply chain risk, and according to U.S. agencies, to phase out their use of Anthropic products. The shutdown appears uniquely targeted at Anthropic, as the end of the day directive directly contradicts President Trump's own established policies. Trump recently signed the executive orders I mentioned before, calling for voluntary model reviews, explicitly stating it should not be constructed as a mandatory license regime, which I think that we should mandate it. Enforcing this sudden, unprecedented restriction on Anthropic software runs completely counter to that statement. And this is Trump being a little bitch, a little dickhead, trying to oppose his regime on Anthropic because they went against him. So Trump can get fucked, but we do still need some type of review process for these types of models. The administration's allies are actively calling out the company for not failing in line. They're also dicks. David Sachs, co-chair of President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, publicly criticized Anthropic, who's also a dick, stating that the company refused to fix the jailbreak vulnerability. Sachs emphasized this friction by stating the administration is frankly bewildered, again, that Anthropic has not wanted to comply with their safety requests. They should be mandated. I agree with this. They should be mandated to comply with the safety requests. And again, as I'm beating the dead horse, Anthropic should fix the problem, and the government should mandate a review of these models, and it should be a specific group of the United States government so we could do it very, very fast. The United States has minted its first trillionaire, and SpaceX pulled off the largest IPO ever. We talked a lot about this, and I shared a lot of my rantings on the New Wealth Transfer podcast. So make sure that you check that out on the 3T Warrior Academy page. And one of these days, I'll have new episodes up on the podcasts feed. Wherever you get your podcasts, you'll be able to hear that. I just have to download them and run them through episode description software. In other words, AI. That's what I'm saying. SpaceX pulled off the largest IPO ever, a massive $75 billion offering that closed its first day of trading up 19% at $160.95 per share, ending the day as the sixth highest valued public company in the world at $2.2 trillion. The world's first trillionaire, the soaring valuation officially minted founder Elon Musk as the world's first trillionaire. Musk himself expressed disbelief during an X live stream, admitting he originally thought that the little company that started in a warehouse in El Segundo was going to fail. Meanwhile, Musk's newfound status has already prompted Democratic lawmakers, including Senator Elizabeth Warren and Representative Ro Khanna, to renew calls for a wealth tax. And Elizabeth Warren, in this regard, can kind of get, she's kind of being a dick here too. You know, you got to call dicks on both sides of the aisles. And I like Elizabeth Warren. I think she did a lot of great stuff for her and Dave Ramsey worked together on a lot of policy regarding bankruptcies. I personally think she did a good job with the financial consumer protection policies that she's put in place. And again, I'm a proponent of leftist ideologies and I'm a Democrat. And so that part I'm not against, but I don't know. I think that she needs to open her eyes and get her shit together as it relates to cryptocurrency, but we're talking about SpaceX here. And the second problem that I have is, rather than just saying, hey, that's really cool, congratulations, Elon, for what you've put into the world, I don't give a shit if he stole the technology. I mean, I do care if he stole the technology in the long run, but what I guess a better way to put this is he has made reusable rockets. I don't think people, especially people of science, or people, I mean, especially people that are religious, that don't read science and follow science literature. One day the world will not be here, not only from our own doing, but from the regular goings of the universe. And when that happens, we will need to be a multi-planetary species. That's fine that he's making $1 trillion. The problem isn't that he is doing something that made him a trillionaire, because he became a trillionaire from the valuation of us buying the fucking stock. It wasn't anything that he maliciously did to become a trillionaire. So why go out there with fucking stakes and hammers? Not like steaks like you eat, but like stakes like they're gonna, I don't know, nooses and hang the man. Like, I think he's a dick and he's a piece of shit father. And but sometimes you have to compartmentalize the things that sometimes good people do that are good, and sometimes the things that people do that are bad. Sometimes bad people do good things, and sometimes good people do horrible fucking things. So again, to go out there and be like, we need a wealth tax. Yeah, we do probably need a wealth tax, but that's not going to stop people from gaining massive amounts of wealth and increasing the wealth gap. You have to change something in which the way in which capitalism works to make sure that it's fair for everybody. If capitalism is the economy and the structure that we're going to use inside of the United States. Following SpaceX acquisition of Musk's xAI in February, the public listing was viewed as a referendum on the market's ongoing AI optimism. And again, I think that the SpaceX IPO is really if you're buying it, you're not really buying it for the future of space right now. It's whether or not AI is going to work out, which his AI sucks. The stock's successful launch allowed the broader market to breathe a sigh of relief, and is seen as a highly positive signal for the upcoming IPO prospects of competitors like Anthropic and OpenAI. And the reason why most of these are going public is because they need so much cash to continue doing their business. They're cash flow heavy, they're cash expenditure heavy, and this is a way for them to create cash influx so that they can then go and grow the companies the way that they need it to be. So again, this isn't like a nefarious thing that these people are doing, that are going and following the process that the NASDAQ lays out in front of them to be able to go public, and then going public and then becoming trillionaires. And then we vilify them for literally going through the policy and the processes that we created in our capitalistic society. It's not, Elon's not the problem. The problem is capitalism. Or at least its current iteration of capitalism. Overall demand for the IPO eclipsed $350 billion. Retail traders alone generated more than $100 billion of that demand, though they only received a fraction of the stock, about $15 billion. The trading frenzy was so intense it caused roughly 5,000 outages on Robinhood, whose CEO is also a dick, with retail net purchases of SpaceX outpacing NVIDIA by more than 3.5 times. I'm sure some of these people aren't assholes. I've just had interactions with a gentleman from Robinhood, and he seems like a douchebag. And I think that, I don't know, I'm just going to leave it there. I don't personally know him. I've just like ran into him a few times. Skeptics point to some of the fundamentals not being where they need to be able to value it at this high. Despite the euphoria, several analysts and investors are waving red flags. SpaceX has yet to turn a profit. Surprise, it makes fucking reusable rockets, recording a massive net loss of $4.28 billion in the first quarter of 2026. One analyst suggested a realistic sum of its parts valuation is closer to $600 billion, roughly 1/3 of its closed market cap, but conceded that betting against the Elon Musk premium is historically a losing trade because Elon Musk is our savior. He should die for our sins. Veteran short seller Jim Chanos also warned that massive IPOs of this scale relative to the broader market usually signal that investors should be cautious and reduce risk. And I ended up not being able to buy any, and I still haven't bought any. I wasn't able to get, I think I didn't affirm my IPO, or I got in too late. I was going to buy 40 shares or $5,000 worth and then just dump it. But because I don't think it's worth this right now. I think in the long term, it's going to be could be a really good company. Again, I think my sentiment is they'll take it back private in the future at some point. I think they needed a way to get a shit ton of cash. But skeptics of SpaceX massive 2.2 trillion valuation point out that, again, the company has yet to turn a profit. It's $4.28 billion loss in its first quarter of 2026. I don't know. I don't think it's very skeptical on how this got valued this way. Again, a lot of people are just really betting on Elon Musk and they think that he's a genius. And I don't have the data to show that he's not a genius. But I don't think that he's a genius. I think he's an industrialist. I think he's really good with industrial design, and he's really good at process design. And I think that he will eventually get us into space. I do believe that. And again, that's why I think that the company will be successful. Is gold really a hedge? I had a client of mine who's a financial advisor, and he was telling me that actually gold over the lifetime has not reliably been a good hedge for investors. I didn't ask him to go into it because I needed to coach him some other stuff, but it does raise the question on whether or not gold is really a hedge for inflation or a hedge at all against anything, I guess. And gold is no longer acting like the reliable geopolitical hedge it was a decade ago. So despite the ongoing war in Iran and broader market uncertainty, gold has consistently defied its traditional safe haven status. In fact, a New York Stock Exchange gauge of gold miners has plummeted 31% since the end of February, severely underperforming the S&P 500's 8% gain over the same period. So what that means is if you utilize gold as a hedge by getting mining, right, going into the gold mining, which isn't the best way to do it, I don't think. But in my opinion, having the physical gold or some other type of gold ETF where it's just the gold itself, is that, again, it didn't outperform. So if you were using gold as a hedge and your financial advisor told you to buy gold mining, you would have not beat the S&P 500 over that period of time. Counterintuitively, these stocks are now sinking when war tensions escalate and rallying when peace seems likely. So, for example, miners dropped 4.8% after President Trump vowed to strike Iran, but immediately rebounded the next trading session when he canceled the airstrikes and cited progress in peace negotiations. This erratic behavior stems from a massive shift last year when gold stocks transformed into highly speculative risk on assets. In 2025, the New York Stock Exchange index tracking gold miners surged an unprecedented 155%. This gravity defying meme stock like pace brought massive liquidity and easy gains, but fundamentally changed how the asset itself trades. The fundamentals for miners are currently being squeezed by a sharp rise in energy prices, which increases their production costs. Furthermore, inflation fears and the threat of Federal Reserve interest rate hikes are heavily weighing on gold, causing the asset to be used mostly by speculators betting on short-term interest rate moves. Asset managers who previously relied on gold are now actively cutting their exposure. Hedge funds and deep value investors are taking their money out of miners and rotating it into utilities, energy, copper, and natural gas. And I want to touch on the copper because that's something inside of our Warrior Academy I have been talking about for a while, that copper is going to be a better hedge against everything because it's going to be utilized in our space race. And I believe that it's also going to be used in more technologies as we move into the future. Instead of gold, it looks like investors are seeking safety in businesses immune to artificial intelligence disruption, or they're directly investing in commodities like I just mentioned, copper, that supply the booming AI data center build out. Given this massive outflow and shift in sentiment, portfolio managers note that being interested in gold right now requires a strong contrarian lean. However, some holdouts remain hopeful that once the current market noise dies down, the fundamental case for gold miners will eventually return. Now, traditionally, gold has been a hedge which is meant to protect your portfolio from losing value, specifically against inflation. For over a decade, deep value investors have viewed gold as a reliable hedge against volatility and a safe haven that delivers steady returns during times of geopolitical or economic uncertainty. So again, the traditional logic is when inflation rises and cash loses purchase power, gold retains its value, which again, that's where we're seeing some of those things kind of be shaken up. Instead of protecting investors from inflation, gold and gold mining stocks are actually being negatively impacted because of a few reasons. The first one is the interest rate threat. So increased fears of rising inflation often lead the Federal Reserve to hike interest rates because gold is a non-yield bearing asset, meaning it doesn't pay out interest or dividends to whoever holds it, so it becomes much less attractive to investors when interest rates are high. So inflation also is tied to a sharp rise in energy prices. So for gold miners, this means their everyday input and operational costs are increasing, which weighs heavily on their stock value. Because gold is highly sensitive to macroeconomic factors like inflation expectations, it has become an unpredictable asset. Currently, instead of using gold as a long-term protective hedge, it is being used more as an instrument for speculators to bet on short-term moves in interest rates. Now, then there are also the people that are doomsday people that want to buy gold so that they can use it in the event that we need to trade with it, which I think is highly unlikely. And the same thing goes for silver. Now, do I have gold? Absolutely. I have silver in my wealth corner. I have gold in my safe. I like physical gold. I like having it around. But again, it's because I have a conviction around gold that it's something that I want to have and hold. So in the event that, for me personally, I would use it for electricity or I would use it for some other means rather than just using it from an investment standpoint. But it does beg the question on whether or not gold is really a good hedge and whether or not it should be part of your portfolio. But I'm telling you this so that you can go do research to find out if you think that gold should be a part of your portfolio and that it will keep doing what it has done for many, many years, which right now it doesn't look like that's the case. To close out the show today, I want to talk a little bit about the European Central Bank. It's officially raised its interest rates for the first time in almost 3 years, lifting what they call the deposit rate from 2% to 2.25% or 225 basis points. Notably, this is the first time a major central bank has shifted policy in reaction to the surge in oil prices triggered by the ongoing war in Iran. The ECB, or European Central Bank, President Christine Lagarde Lagarde made it clear that the inflation shock is broadening well beyond the energy sector. She noted that the direct costs are already obvious, but indirect costs are now showing up throughout the entire economy. Lagarde defended the rate hike as essential, stating that the main risk would be letting inflation spiral out of control and losing price stability, which is why you need to raise interest rates. And we need to do that in the United States. The ECB's new quarterly projections forecast a difficult road ahead. The central bank expects consumer prices to advance more quickly this year and remain well above their target in the first half of 2027, before eventually easing a 2% in 2028. This combination of higher inflation and increased borrowing costs is also threatening to sap buying power and dwindle economic growth across the Eurozone. The European Central Bank's proactive hike stands in stark contrast to the wait-and-see approach of other major G7 nations. The Bank of Canada just kept its borrowing costs unchanged, and both the U.S. Federal Reserve and the Bank of England are expected to hold steady next week. Meanwhile, the Bank of Japan is the only other major player expected to continue a gradual tightening cycle. And so my guess is Japan and the European Central Bank, or the European Union, will be in a better position as we move into increased inflation and eventually, my guess would be a recession. All right, guys. Well, make sure that you follow me at Age of Jeremy. Make sure that you listen to my regular show, on the podcast feed. If you came across this and you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe, like it, share it with some friends. And as I always say, be thankful, grateful in time, and we'll talk with you soon. This has been another episode of Markets Radar. Bye.